thank you everyone for joining. So, if everybody hopefully has gotten to grab some food. If not, there's some pizza back there and chips and water and things like that. So definitely grab something. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. On behalf of CARE Washington, I want to thank you all for coming and joining us here today. My name is Imran Siddiqui. I'm the Executive Director of CARE Washington. I joined CARE Washington at the end of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, so unfortunately I haven't gotten to meet a lot of folks in the community, but alhamdulillah, slowly starting to get out there and do some more events just like this, inshallah, to get more out there and meeting people from the community there. So prior to this, I was the Executive Director of CARE Arizona from 2015, and then I was on the board over there. So I've been involved with fighting Islamophobia since the 9/11 era, basically. That's been part of my life, and that's sort of my area of expertise. So I'm really glad that we were able to gather here today to talk about an extremely important subject, which is global Islamophobia. A lot of the folks here, especially those of you who are in college, you literally have experienced only the post 9/11 era in your lifetimes. You have a skewed sort of view of what a pre 9/11 reality is and what a post 9/11 reality is. And for those of us who have experienced both sides of that, I think it's really interesting to just have this conversation and to explore the subject a little bit deeper. So that's what we're here for today. Anti-Muslim sentiment has reared its head throughout history. Whether you've seen it through the Crusades, for example, 1,000 years ago, that was the underpinning of how the Crusades manifested themselves and the rhetoric that was used in order to fight those Crusades. It's manifested itself through colonialism in invading countries, for example, in North Africa, the Middle East, during many eras during the past few hundred years. So we've seen it rear its head in those ways. And in reality, Islamophobia has existed since the time where Islam started, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So we all are very well aware as Muslims, those of us who are here as Muslims, that Islamophobia is as old as Islam. There's always been forces that have been out there who have utilized propaganda and misinformation in order to keep Muslims down, or to change the narrative, or to use hate. You can go as far back as Abu Lahab and Abu Jahl and so on and so forth. But what we're here to talk about is really Islamophobia in a contemporary, modern day sense. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. I'm just here to set the stage for our special guest, but these are just some of the things that we really sort of want to think about. You think about in the post 9/11 era and the war on terror, for example, going and carpet bombing different countries. You see drone attacks, you see high levels of body counts, and sort of the desensitization of this mass death that has occurred on a global scale, much of which has happened at the hands of the U.S. government. But what we've also seen is that this type of foreign policy is now being exported into different countries. You see, this has been a very successful playbook for foreign policy when you want to go and basically justify actions against a population of people. You can utilize Islamophobia, and over the course of the past 2+ decades, it's been an acceptable form of bigotry, and Muslims unfortunately have paid that expense. And so it's reared its head in places such as India, for example. You've seen citizenship bans, people who've had ancestry there for hundreds and up to 1,000 years in India. All of a sudden, minorities are being targeted there, having their citizenship revoked, all under the guise of fighting terrorism. You see hijab bans taking place at universities in India now. You see hijab bans in France, for example. You see this jumping from country to country. You see what's happening in East Turkestan with the Uyghur population. And it's happening before our eyes. It's very apparent that there is this systemic repression that's taking place, re-education camps that are out there, and this is all being done under the guise of the same type of rhetoric that was employed in the War on Terror. Myanmar, you see what's happened to the Rohingya population. It's a shame, because what you see in terms of openness to refugees in this country, like in the aftermath of like a Ukraine war, very much justified that we should be taking care of refugees from places like Ukraine, but like, what about those people from Syria? What about those people from Myanmar who've witnessed rape, who've witnessed genocide, who've been driven from their home that's been there for over 100 years? So this type of, desensitization to, the identity of who is the refugee is really, I think, plays a role in this as well. So how does global Islamophobia manifest itself? This desensitization to mass Muslim death in these global wars, and now they're manifesting themselves in different ways. Now you see the rise in far-right fascism in Europe, for example. Anders Breivik in Norway, for example. He massacred 80 people in Oslo, Norway, because he felt that Muslim immigration and the Great Replacement theory was taking place in Europe, and he needed to do something about it, and just went out there and massacred 80 people. You see in Quebec City, Canada, for example, Alexander Bissonnette walked into a masjid in Quebec City, massacred 6 people, opened fire. Who was he influenced by? He was influenced by Trumpism, he was influenced by the Muslim ban, he was influenced by people like Ben Shapiro, who was like, spreading misinformation about refugees, Islam, and Arabs, and so on and so forth. Brendan Tarrant, Christchurch, New Zealand, massacred 51 people in Christchurch, New Zealand. So this Islamophobia is not just a phenomenon that we're experiencing here in the West. It's happening in countries across the world. And now we're seeing this intersection of gun culture, this proliferation of AR-15s and automatic weapons and Islamophobia. And this, for the purposes of this talk, we're talking about, hate against the Muslim community and the targeting against the Muslim community. But in reality, this manifests itself against multiple communities. In India, for example, you see the Sikh community, you see Dalits being targeted, you see the rise in anti-Semitism here in the United States, you see the Pittsburgh shooting, Poway, and so on and so forth. So all of these forms of hate are interconnected with one another. And this is not just, hate that, sometimes we see like the very visceral forms of hate that take place from the right wing, obviously like demonizing, Muslims, and, the Muslim ban was a very visceral, in-your-face version of Islamophobia. But you also see it on, the liberal spectrum as well. So in the aftermath of like the January 6th insurrection, you see, far-right white supremacists, going and invading our capital. You see this rise in, far-right activity in these places. And what you start seeing, liberal commentators refer to these people as, they started referring to them as the American Taliban, or, things of that nature. So now you see people who are purported allies on the liberal end of the spectrum, utilizing the same, like, this is not our problem here, like now you're all of a sudden trying to utilize that, like trying to make it an Islamic type problem as well. And it also rears its head on the far left as well, under the guise of anti-imperialism. You see people denying the Bosnian genocide, for example. This is stuff that's out in the open, unfortunately. Denial of the Uyghur genocide, denial of like a lot of these different forms of bigotry. So nobody's immune from this, is I think the larger point of what I'm just trying to convey here. But that's enough from me. I think we're here to see somebody else. So I wanted to pass this on to somebody who is, been a friend for a really long period of time, has been on the front lines of fighting Islamophobia as long as I've known her. We faced down far-right white supremacists together in places like Arizona, and I've seen her become a prime target for the Islamophobia industry as well. But this has not stopped her or deterred her one bit. She's been the very visible face for the Muslim community for many years, and she's been a mentor to countless young activists in the community as well, and is always willing to give her time to young Muslim activists and student groups as well. So without further ado, let me call up Linda Sarsour.
Yay!
Give it up one more time to Imran Siddiqui from your local CARE Washington chapter. I'm a big defender of CARE, a big supporter of CARE, just so that's all on the record here. If there was the CARE Defense League of America, I would be the president of it. So I hope that you all continue to support the great work that CARE does, especially this great CARE chapter, which is actually one of the more of the successful chapters in the country, just so you all know. So hopefully the Seattle community or greater Seattle is very proud to have one of the most successful chapters in the larger CARE network. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
I am very honored and humbled to be here today. I actually was invited here by a church called Valley and Mountain, and I'm going to be doing a speaking engagement tomorrow at the Rainier Art Center. And Imran was like, would you be open if you're coming on Saturday to come and hang out with some Muslim students and our friends? And I said, absolutely, I'm there. Just tell me the time, the place, and I'm with you all. So I just want to say thank you to the Muslim Student Association and all of your incredible work that you do. Can't wait to buy my hoodie. So hopefully they leave with no hoodies today. They have a really great design. It says Salam, which is peace on the front. It's a beautiful design on the back. Shout out to whoever did the design because it was pretty good. You know, when Imran said to me, what are we going to talk about? And it feels like we always talk about the same thing. And the sad part of the situation is that when we have to talk about the same thing, that's the problem. There should be no reason why we come back every year to talk about the ways in which anti-Muslim sentiment continues to impact not just our communities, but all communities. Why is it something that still exists? And why actually is it something that continues to evolve? And why is it so scary, and how is it connected to the fascism that we're seeing all over the world? And to be quite honest with you, and I know that many of us, especially those of us in the room who are Muslim, I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing our people suffer. Whether you're talking about Uyghur Muslims that are in concentration camps right now, not in 1940, we're talking about 2023. I went to Istanbul, and I went and met with widows, and I met with people who are separated from their families, Uyghur Muslims right now, who are in Istanbul right now, trying to create a life for themselves, trying to figure out ways to advocate for their family members who are living in horror in places like China right now. I was telling Imran, when I think about our Rohingya sisters and brothers, Rohingyas have experienced some unimaginable atrocities. Women who are victims of torture and rape. People who have experienced genocide. Not 50 years ago or 30 years ago, right now, today. I told Imran that I was worried I wasn't even going to get to Seattle because I didn't have a passport, I didn't have an ID. And I was like, how am I going to travel? Because I had to send my passport to the Bangladeshi embassy because I want to get a visa to go to Bangladesh.
Yes.
Because I want to go there and be able to say that I bore witness to the largest refugee camp in the world.
Yep.
Did you know that the largest refugee camp in the world is in Cox's Bazar on the coast of Bangladesh? Do people understand that Bangladesh is already a poor country?
Yes.
They could barely feed the people that are Bangladeshi and live there. And now they have had to accept almost 1 million refugees. And guess what? Overall, they've gotten no support.
Correct.
Even rich Gulf nations and other and UN nations giving peanuts to the people of Bangladesh to support them. How is that possible? How are we watching these women, most of them women and children, who have had to cross oceans, and you saw them, you saw the photos? And it's as if the Rohingyas don't even exist anymore. Nobody talks about the Rohingya Muslims. These are people who need mental health services. These are people who've experienced things that I can't even describe to you. And in order for me to even feel the credibility to come out and talk about Rohingyas, I'm going to go all the way to Bangladesh. Because I want to say that I saw, that I heard, that I sat and I felt pain, that I was in close proximity to these people. These are our people. And I don't even mean that from the perspective of they are our people because we're Muslim. They are our people. They're human beings that need our support. They need our voices to say, where is the world to support these people that literally have experienced today in our lifetime some unimaginable atrocities. It's everywhere that we look. And you know what makes Islamophobia? There's been many communities before us who have experienced this before, right? And Muslims are not the only people that have had the history of that type of demonization and vilification that has caused atrocities on people that are like us. Jewish people can tell you the same. And so we've seen this happen historically over and over again. So why do we say things like never again, but it happens again and again? I just don't understand that. We're a people of a lot of words. And the suffering continues to happen over and over and over again. And we move on with our lives. And listen, not everybody's an activist. Not everybody's an organizer. This is not everybody's full-time job. But we could all do something. Anti-Muslim sentiment is very dangerous. And the reason why it's very dangerous in America in particular is because anti-Muslim bigotry is very acceptable in America. It's a very normal thing. Nobody gets held accountable for being anti-Muslim in America. You could pass laws, there's no accountability. You could be a radio show host, you could be on CNN, and you could literally espouse hateful things about Muslims. You could call for a ban on Muslim immigration, and guess what happens? You get to be the President of the United States of America. I'm going to give you a personal story about something that recently happened to me. Many of you already know this is an old story. When the Women's March happened, I became a prime target for the right wing. They were like, listen, we're not having this Women's March situation. Women leading, women building power, women building political capital, women electing other women to office. What is going on here? The right wing was like, not on our watch. So what happened, we didn't know this at the time. So this is something I only learned because the New York Times told me this in September of 2022. In April of 2022, a New York Times reporter sent me a cryptic email. She said, hello, my name is Ellen Berry, I'm from the New York Times, and I'd like to meet you in person because I want to talk to you about something. Now, mind you, I have a lot of anxiety. Anytime a media outlet wants to talk about me or with me, I'm already like, what's the controversy? Just put it out from the beginning. I just want to know where we're going with this. She's like, look, it's not something that I want to talk about on email. So, of course, I'm even extra anxious now. So I made some time. I went and met this lady at my old offices where I used to work in Brooklyn. She came and she said to me, listen, I know you went through some stuff for a few years. You know, of course, there's still remnants of it today, but there was a prime time that I had with the right wing. And she said, I want you to do an exercise for me. And I said, what is that? She said, I want you to remember all the big controversies, at the times where it was a lot, where you couldn't believe the volume of it. And if you could remember when those times were. And listen, if you went through it, you remember it. So I said, well, it started with the Monday after the Women's March. And then I remember something happened in, February. And then I was going to be the CUNY commencement speaker at the CUNY Graduate Center, and another drama happened. And then one time I went to ISNA, and I did a speech there, and I used the word jihad, and then when a whole thing happened, and this and this. And then after I gave her all the months, the spikes, the woman pulls out a piece of paper. And it's a graph. Every month that I told her was the month that was, all of that was reflected on this graph. So what had happened was, there was a group of academics who were doing some research on something we already knew, that somewhere along the line, the Russians were, putting out some misinformation, disinformation, trying to influence a bit of what was going on in the election. Now, mind you, I'm not one of those neoliberals that blames the Democrats losing all on the Russians. The Democrats lost for a whole lot of other reasons, but the Russians were in there too. But I was never one of those. I was never like Russiagate, just so we're all clear. What happened was, the Russians obviously felt that they had an interest in someone like Donald Trump becoming the president of the United States, right? So remember, they were buying ads and using social media and putting out kind of misinformation and things like that. Of course, Donald Trump wins the election, so the Russians pivoted. They were like, okay, our guy won, Now there's these women running around the streets in the millions. We got to do something here. So what did they do? They decided to start a campaign to undermine the power that the Women's March was basically accumulating. So what did they do? They went on the internet and they started testing. Look at how smart they are. I wish the Democrats did this. They started testing messaging. So first they tested, the Women's March is a front for Antifa, which is the anti-fascist, right? I wish that were true, because we still had to convince all the white women that we were anti-fascist, but I was. But anyway, that didn't work. That didn't move anybody. Nobody was moved by that messaging. Then they tried the whole, they're a bunch of bra-burning, man-hating feminists. That didn't really move very far either. The internet wasn't really feeling that either. So they was like, man, this is not working. What are we gonna do? So then they were like, let's look at the leadership. Let's see who the weakest link is amongst the leadership. Ta-da! Me. I was the weakest link. Because the Russians also understood American racism. They understood how American bigotry worked, right? So while we have pervasive anti-black racism in America, on every level, you still can't really come out and call people the N-word in public. There's still a kind of decorum, right? Not systemically, we have the racism, but in a public manner, right? Politically, it's not really acceptable. So they probably didn't think Tamika was spicy enough for them. But this one right here, this Linda Sarsour lady, this is gonna be good. She's Palestinian, so we could weaponize anti-Semitism against her. She supports boycott, divestment, sanctions. She's already a lightning rod for some of the people in the right wing. She's also wears hijab, and she's trying to be, this doesn't make sense, she's trying to be in a women's rights movement, she wears hijab. That's something we could immediately discredit really quickly. So the Russians ran with some good messaging. They ran with the messaging that I was a theocrat that was infiltrating the women's rights movement as a fundamentalist Muslim. I was a front for the Muslim sisterhood. Apparently there's a sisterhood, not just the Muslim Brotherhood. Apparently there was a sisterhood. I was like, that's newsflash for me. I was a front for the Muslim sisterhood, which is a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, all kinds of things. And the internet went wild. They loved it. And guess what? Everybody loved it. It wasn't even just the right wing who ate it up, because they were already on my opposition. Then little by little, white women, the neoliberal women were like, whoa, this is, if you say it enough on the internet, it must be true, right? No one was being held accountable. No one in the mainstream media who was even trying to reaffirm or repeat the things, no one said, hey, wait a minute, that's anti-Muslim what you're saying. Leave the sister alone. And so that's just an example of a personal one to show you how anti-Muslim bigotry can manifest and be, because no one stops it. There's no one that says, everybody put your hands up and back up over here. And this always has happened, especially in recent times, and Imran took you all the way back. I'm gonna keep you in the last 3 decades. Some guy gets up and says, Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Nobody says, let's do some research. Let's make sure this is real. High-level security analysts in the United States government that probably went through massive training that we would never understand. Did anybody one day say, wait a minute, who saw the weapons of mass destruction? Where exactly are the weapons of mass destruction? Inherently, Muslims are some cunning, violent people, so of course Saddam Hussein would have it. Why do you gotta see it? Just take my word for it. It's over there. And we killed almost 1 million Iraqis. Like as if they were a bunch of flies, like no worth to their lives. Even till today, we have never reconciled, right? This process that we, as the United States of America, massacred almost 1 million Iraqis in Iraq. And we went into a perpetual war in Afghanistan. And I will never forget Congressman Barbara Lee, by the way, because this is going to be history, was the only member of Congress of 435 members of Congress that stood up and voted against the war in Afghanistan. That is never to be forgotten, because that's the kind of courage that we need today. That she was willing up to stand against Democrats and Republicans, against her colleagues, against backlash, to stand up and say, I vote no on the war in Afghanistan. And then we went to Afghanistan and we were in a war, and then white liberal women said, we gotta free the women of Afghanistan. Gotta take the burqas off, we gotta, take your clothes off. This is not liberation. We went to Afghanistan, and then look what we did to Afghanistan. The very goals that we went there for, because we were supposed to somehow combat terrorism, right? And guess the very people we went to fight against, which are the Taliban, guess who they are now? They're the leaders of Afghanistan. We failed the Afghan people. And then when they came to America, or some of them tried to come to America, they did not get the same welcome red carpet that we gave to Ukrainian refugees. Yep. And let me be clear about that. Bring all the Ukrainians to America. I welcome every Ukrainian refugee to come here and get safety and sanctuary in the United States of America. But our Afghan sisters and brothers, our Syrian sisters and brothers, our Iraqi sisters and brothers deserve the same red carpet treatment and the same expeditious treatment that the people of Ukraine got here in the United States of America. So that's what Islamophobia also looks like, right? Sometimes we don't even think about it in those terms, right? So how expeditiously, somehow a new process, they just created a new process for Ukrainians. Yep. There are refugees, Syrian refugees, who sit in camps for 4 to 5 years before, or Somali refugees who have went to multiple countries, Yemenis who were in Djibouti and went to Egypt and went to other countries before they figured out a way to get here. And somehow within 2-3 months, we were welcoming Ukrainian refugees to the United States of America. That's a kind of covert kind of Islamophobia that is not in your face. But when you think about it, what's the difference between a traumatized young Syrian family and a traumatized young Ukrainian family? What's the difference? The difference is that Ukrainians that were coming here weren't Muslims. They were white. They easily mix in with the majority of this country. And so those are the kind of things that are not embedded in the American public and the American conscious, and understanding how even the ways in which we treat different people is based on something inside of us that we haven't been able to eradicate. It's this, when I think about all we've endured as Muslim Americans, especially in the post 9/11 era, right? The Patriot Act, the unwarranted surveillance of our mosques, the ways in which our Muslim student associations are policed and scrutinized in ways that other student associations are, and our SJPs are also scrutinized. The ways in which our Muslim leadership has been demonized and vilified, whether it's the ways in which there are campaigns that slander groups like CARE or MAS and others that that do really good work in our community. When we think about policies like the Muslim ban, so a lot of people said, Sister Linda, the Muslim ban was bad, and then we defeated Trump, right? And then Joe Biden became the president, and guess what Joe Biden did? He rescinded the Muslim ban. Where are the families that are supposed to get back together? None of the families that were separated under the Donald Trump administration have been reunited, because the Biden administration said what we're going to do is we're not going to ban them anymore, but they had no plan for the people who were already banned. That's not enough for me. It's not enough for us and our people. And so that's the thing about us as Muslim Americans and others who are our allies, is to continue to organize, to say that we have to right the harms that have been done. And there are 40,000 families who are still separated because of this ban that should have never happened in the first place. When I think about something that Imran said, which I think is important, the ways in which you see people sometimes care about Muslims. Like, I don't like the sometimes. You either care about our people all the time or don't care about me at all. And I'm going to give you an example. This is controversial, and I'm controversial, so that's what I do for a living. It's fine. I've learned to own it. All of a sudden, you see people in uproar about what's happening in Iran. I'm one of those people, just to be clear to the Muslims here. I don't believe in morality police. I don't believe in governments telling us what to wear and when not to wear. My faith is something that is personal to me. So I'm outraged about young people who are literally being executed in Iran because they some guy wrote a rap song that was anti-government. Like, what kind? This is outrageous. And that, for me, to be honest, even though Iran is a Muslim country, that is anti-Muslim to me, because that does not reflect my values as a Muslim. You don't execute people because you don't agree with them. That's just not how this works. These people weren't a harm to you. They didn't harm you. They said words you didn't like, and then you execute them. That's unacceptable, and it is not part of who we are as Muslims. In Islam, my hijab is my choice. I choose to wear my hijab. And there are a lot of Muslim sisters that you know that are in our community here in the United States and all over the Muslim world, and you can go and see them, that do not yet choose to wear hijab. That doesn't make me more Muslim than them because I wear hijab and they don't wear hijab. This is not how our faith is measured. It's not measured by whether we wear hijab. Sometimes we have sisters who wear hijab who don't pray, and sisters who don't wear hijab and pray more than the sisters that wear. It's not the way we judge people in our community. So I don't believe in this idea that you go to a country and the government tells you you have too much hair showing and not too much hair, that when you advocate for yourself, then you're murdered. That's wrong. I don't care what Muslim scholar comes to debate me. It is unacceptable in my eyes. But here's where the hypocrisy comes in. We see American public, they'll get outraged and they'll say they're in solidarity with Iranian women around this morality police and around, hijab and the way in which the Islamic Republic acts, right? But where are you when Muslim women are under attack in places like France? Mm-hmm. The thing that I call on people for is consistency across the board. If you're mad at Iran for forcing women to wear hijab, then be mad at France for forcing our daughters to choose between their faith and their higher education, their faith and their careers, their faith and, for God's sakes, going to a beach. We can't go to a beach in France wearing a long sleeve bikini. So my thing with the ways in which Islamophobia unfolds is that if it's in the best interest of if for example, when it comes to Iran, because there's an anti-Iranian sentiment in America, if that argument in solidarity with Iranian women helps, right, reaffirm the anti-Iranian rhetoric, then it seems okay to be in solidarity with Iranian women. I'm in solidarity with Iranian women. And I'm in solidarity with Muslim women in France and Muslim women in Palestine who want to have access to freedom and to travel and to be able to have an education. I'm in solidarity with Uyghur Muslim women and women and Rohingya women who have been victims of rape and the very things that we fight against here in the United States of America. The other way that Islamophobia shows up as well, which we really need to sit with, is the way in which we hear and have access to anything that has to do with Muslims and Islam, right? Who are the voices? Sometimes I'll be watching CNN and they'll be having a whole conversation about something related to Muslims or Islam or even Iran. I don't see a single Iranian up there, right? Or you don't see a single Muslim.
Yep.
They'll have an entire panel about Palestine, about what's happening to Palestinians without a single Palestinian that's on it. Be a whole bunch of white men talking about.
Yeah.
Because why? Because Muslims don't know how to speak for themselves. Because Palestinians don't know how to speak to themselves. There's this. It's just so pervasive in every which way that it's hard for me to even gather the different ways in which anti-Muslim sentiment shows up in this world. And the bottom line here in the United States also is that it's very interesting to me how we have set such high standards for Muslim majority countries. We will sit back with all the confidence in the world and start telling me, well, Qatar has these bad laws, they do these bad things in this country, and that's fine. You could have, if that's really the case, then let's criticize those countries for whatever laws. Don't throw stones from glass houses. We are the first generation in American history that has to tell our daughters that you have less rights than we do. That's the first time that ever happened in America. Mm-hmm. Over the course since the founding of America, with every generation you got a little bit more. This group got the right to vote, and then another generation came, and then more people got the right to vote, then the black women got the right to vote, then the immigrants got the right to vote. Every generation gave us just a little bit more. We're the generation going backwards. And so if you're going to sit here and want me to join in with you to criticize Muslim majority dictatorships, which, let's be clear, these people are not telling you they're a democracy, right? You can't compare standards, right? When you're supposed to be the leader of the free world and you're supposed to be, democracy and every, man, woman, person vote and we protect it. You can't be the stalwart of human rights and criticize everybody else. Well, we are fighting every day over here. We're fighting for vote. They don't want to fight. They don't want to protect voting rights in this country. We are literally terrorizing immigrant communities and undocumented people in this country. We went back on women's rights issues. We have just, listen, we're only in January, folks. First of all, by the way, 2022 was the deadliest year in America for police violence. More people were killed in 2022 by police than any other year before. We have the most police killings in the world. There are countries that maybe have, I mean, I think one is too many, just so we're all clear, but there are countries around the world where even their police don't carry guns. I remember when I went to Costa Rica, they don't have a military in Costa Rica. And I felt safe as safe can be in Costa Rica. Just this month, we're not even finished with January, the LAPD killed 3 people already. One of them is my friend Patrice Culler's cousin, who's a teacher, right? Keenan Anderson. Got into an accident, stops the car, gets out the car. Guess what Keenan does? Flags down the police, because that's what you do when you get in a car accident, right? You're trying to get the cops' attention. The cops come, forget why they're there, because you're there because there's a cars hit each other situation. And starts, of course, you're talking about a young black man who's already nervous being in the vicinity of cops. And now you're all being aggressive, asking all these questions that are not even part or have anything to do with what's going on. So now he's nervous, right? So now you got him in a stage where now he's fight or flight, right, mode, because he knows the experiences of people before him that have been shot in little traffic stops, as we know. We watched that Philando Castile, remember? Mm-hmm. This is a man with a registered gun, and he got shot and killed in front of his girlfriend and her child. Remember that? This is the kind of thing that I'm sure was going through Keenan's head. So what does he try to do? He got scared. So he's like, okay, forget it. Like, I don't even need your help. I'm getting out of here. Cops got him. They tased him 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. The man died. There should be no cops, by the way, in traffic violations. You don't need a gun for that. If you're gonna stop me because I sped on the highway, stop me. Give me a ticket. You don't need to have a big old gun. You don't need to tase. You're not gonna tase people for little traffic violations. Because what ends up happening is this situation that happened with Keenan Anderson. He got murdered. And then what happens after Keenan Anderson comes and gets murdered? The cops are already putting out a story. The story is that, by the way, there was no autopsy. There was no official autopsy before. Then the cops before the official autopsy are already telling you, oh, he had some drugs in his system. He had this in his system. They will criminalize a dead man that can't defend himself in a court of law. They're already trying to. This is the same thing. Anti-black racism is similar to other forms of bigotry, right? Especially when it's systemic. The point that they're trying to say to you is, we're giving you all the reasons why that man deserved to die. When he flagged you down, you didn't know if he had drugs in his system. When you tased him 5 times and then he died on the 6th time, you didn't know that he had drugs in his system. So this criminalization of corpse is just another way, again, for government officials and those in power to justify the type of systemic violence that we experience in our communities, especially those who are marginalized people in the United States of America. And it's the same thing we do when we go abroad, right? Same thing. Iraqi people, who are the Iraqi people, what the Iraqi government did or didn't do so we could justify murder of people. There was one time a quote that a very brave and courageous woman that everybody needs to study, because I think when we even study, we're coming off of Dr. King Day, right, which was just on Monday. And it's interesting, how we have memorialized Dr. King, who deserves it. Dr. King is someone who has changed trajectory in this country, narrative, and the way in which we think, and also has brought, and of course those who were with him in the civil rights movement, brought change to this country in ways that many have benefited, even though sometimes we think we're still far away from where we need to be. But there were many brilliant women around Dr. King that we don't memorialize in the same way, that we don't give the same credit to for their strategy, their brilliance, the way in which they documented the experiences of those in the civil rights movement. And one of these women was Ida B. Wells. And Ida B. Wells said something that I want you always to keep in mind. I'm going to move on from this Keenan situation, but it's very close. It just happened, so it's something I'm very passionate about. And I want you to always keep this in the back of your mind anytime that we're in a situation when government officials are already out in the press conference telling you their side of the story. Ida B. Wells said, those who commit the murders write the reports. Mm-hmm. Right? Those who commit the murders write the report. So when the Muslim guy is debating me on my Facebook telling me, but I read the police report, and I see my question back to him, oh, who wrote the police report? Oh, the guy that murdered the guy is the guy that wrote the police report, so that's the story that you heard, right? But I don't know what the other story is, because the person that would tell me what the other perspective is dead. So we have to be very careful also when we hear the government saying, well, we have to go to Iran, or we have to go to Iraq, or we have to do this, or we have to do that. Why, right? What's the evidence, right? Why are we justifying, why are we allowing these things to happen, keeping in mind that the people writing these analysis, writing these reports, are people with levels of power and influence, that the people that they're going to murder or have war with or engage with are people with less power. So we just got to be careful about what it is that we read and what it is that we believe. But back to, quickly, the conversation that we're having here today. And really all I wanted to come and say here today is we just have a lot of work to do. And I will say that as we continue to work against rising fascism all over the world, right? Remember, this is not an American phenomenon. This is everywhere. It's happening everywhere. This idea of superiority, right? Of who deserves access, who deserves rights, who doesn't deserve rights, and what we will do to ensure that people don't get rights, right? Because sometimes it's not just I strip you of your rights. Sometimes I have to do a lot worse than that, and that's the scary part about the uncertainty of the kind of world that we live in. And what I will say to all of you is that, you know, it doesn't matter to me who's in power, and that's one of the things that I always get worried about. People in this country move by Democrat, Republican. I don't move like that. In fact, for me, Democrats have been at some points more harmful to our people because they're supposed to be on our side, right? So we can easily say the other, you know, Republicans are bad, but what about when the Democrats vote the same way as the Republicans? Like, we're in a very kind of catch-22 when it comes to that. And so the reason why I'm saying that is that I was worried about something, and it kind of manifested what I worried about, which was that we were going to defeat Donald Trump, and then everybody was going to go back to brunch, right? That's it. You know, you defeated Donald Trump, so what else do you want from me? And we don't see the same type of mobilization and organization and work that we saw in the 4 years that Donald Trump was the president of the United States. And one part of me feels like, is that what we need in this country? Do we need an overt fascist to be the president in order for people to say, wow, we just really got to get up and protect our people? We still got to protect our people. Immigrants are still under attack in this country. We are still under attack in this country. Our foreign policy, look what's happening in Palestine right now. Now, if you ask Palestinians, they'll tell you that Israeli governments have always been right-wing and have always been the oppressors. But we are now seeing one of the worst, literally overt right-wing governments that the Palestinian people have ever experienced. These are people are outright fascists. They're not even ashamed of it. They're telling you straight up. They're telling you they're anti-women. One of the leaders now literally said, I am a homophobe. That's what he said. He's proud of who he is, right? These are people that are telling you there's people in this new government that say, what, Palestine? There's no such thing as Palestine. There's no such thing as Palestinian people. These are people that are literally demolishing homes right now while we're sitting in this room. Literally the other day in a village called Hizma, they literally demolished an entire business district, a whole strip of market, and maybe 17 businesses so they can expand a settlement that was right behind the wall of that business district in Hizma. This is an overt government, right? And here we are in America, guess what? We're funding all of that. And we haven't decided that this is the time when we could say unequivocally with a government that's so anti and antithetical to movements in America that we don't stand with this government, right? That we are going to condition aid to Israel, for example, or even, and in fact, the Biden administration right now is supporting the building of an embassy on stolen Palestinian land. This is what's happening like today, like right now, like while we're all in this room together. So anyway, I will end by being an organizer, because that's what I do. You gotta organize, folks, right? Like, we're not helpless. We have resources, we have tools, we have things to do. One of the first things that we have access to is we have access to each other. We have access to our fellow students and our faculty and our teachers and our friends and outside of school and inside of school. You gotta educate people. You know, when I tell people about Rohingyas, people have no idea. They know nothing about the experience of Rohingya Muslims and their experience in Burma and Myanmar and what happened and how they ended up in refugee camps in Bangladesh. When we talk about Uyghurs, not everybody knows the plight of the Uyghur people. So if you have information, share articles, share that with friends and say, look, this is also happening around the world. These are the kinds of responsibilities that we have to, at least at the very least, educate others about what's happening to our people. These are our sisters and brothers, and we are not whole if they are not whole. You know, the other thing is resources, right? The Bangladeshi government and NGOs in Bangladesh, they need support, they need help, right? I say this as a Palestinian American. I raise money for Palestine all the time, and a lot of people do. I know MAPS does, and Muslim Masajid do that here. We're always supporting the Palestinians. And I want you to keep supporting the Palestinian people. But we gotta support the Rohingyas too. We gotta support the Bangladeshi people too, right? So thinking about, like, maybe the MSA wants to think about potentially, Ramadan is coming up. You know, what if we say this Ramadan, we're gonna make sure that at least one fundraiser in this Muslim community in Seattle goes to Rohingyas, for example. And I know the people are generous. Seattle is one of the most generous communities. And I promise you that the people that need it are those Rohingya Muslims and those Bangladeshi NGOs that are doing very courageous work and supporting women. Oh my goodness, if you hear their stories, it's beyond the imagination. The other thing I'll say, and if people think this is cliche, is we got elections coming up. And I always tell people about elections. Election is not going to free the people. We're not freeing Palestine through elections, just so we're all clear. But what it does some harm reduction, right? We do harm reduction. We just make sure more people are not harmed. We just try to maintain what we already have. Sometimes we can elect somebody transformative, but guess what? It's not enough. We need 100 transformative people. But make sure you're engaging and participating in democracy. And I do that in honor of not only those who died and sacrificed for us here to be able to participate in democracy, but I look at the people of Sudan and people who get up in the face of snipers and oppression to say, I want the right to vote, I want a free election, and I do that in their honor, in the honor of the people of Yemen, the people of Syria, the people of Egypt and Tunis and Algeria, the many countries where people rose up and said, give us access to a free democracy. And you have a free democracy here. It doesn't always work perfectly, but it works enough for us to participate in it. And then the last thing that I will say is, or two more things, is that sometimes we do participate in democracy, right? We go to the polls, we vote, and we do it. And that's it. And we just go quiet till the next time there's an election. Those elected officials need to hear from you. You need to roll up to their offices and say, I'm your constituent. You wouldn't be in there if it wasn't for me and my family or me and my community or me and my friends. And this is what I need you to know. Sometimes you gotta go in there and educate them about an issue that you care about. Sometimes you gotta go in there and tell them to do something. Hey, so-and-so congressman has a letter. Sign the letter. I hear there's a piece of legislation come up. Vote for it or don't vote for it. Let them hear from you. Don't just go silent till the next election comes around. You have that right, and guess what? They have to engage you. Like, it's not their choice. If you are a constituent that lives in that district, their people got to engage you in that conversation. And the last thing that I'll say is, and this sounds, crazy to say, but I only say this as an organizer, we just got to get to know one another, people. We live in this virtual age, and I don't know about anybody, I don't thrive in this kind of age. I'm old school. I grew up in like AOL.com days, right? Where you do the phone jack, and then you took the phone jack out the phone to put it in your computer. That's how old I am, just so people know, right? I grew up when the computers were the fat ones, the box computers. I swear to God, that was me. I grew up like that. And I know I got some good genes, folks, but I'm old. And I grew up in the age where I went outside, where I sat with my neighbors, where I had conversations, where I would be at my university and I would be hanging out at the cafeteria, talking to people, getting to know people, having real conversation. Now you go to the cafeteria, either people are on their laptops or they're on their phones. I don't thrive like that. That's just not who I am. It's not how I feel whole. Talk to people. If you just, I get the phone thing, it's addictive. But sometimes we gotta look up. Right? You look up, there's freaking humans in front of you. There's people here. There's actual people. Get away from the metal and the screens and the glass and talk to people. Where are you from? What are you studying? Where are you, hey, friends, you are here. Where did you come from? Just get to know people. And I say this to you because in the movement, we have this thing, and I don't know, you probably heard it before, you hear people doing this chant in the movement that says, you know, the last part is, I won't say the whole thing, the last part is, we must love and protect one another. We have nothing to lose but our changes. And I always say to people, how are we supposed to protect one another when we don't even know one another? And that reminds me of a quick story before I get off the stage and give this back to Imran. I was doing a lecture one time at Cleveland State University, and it was like 2016. I get up in this auditorium, everything's great, I do my little speech, and at the end we do question and answer. This young Muslim boy from Muslim Student Association gets up, and he says to me, Sister Linda, I want to know who lived in America at the time of Japanese internment. He said, I want to know who the people were that allowed for their neighbors to literally be dragged from their homes and put in camps on this U.S. soil. I want to know who those people are. I'm not going to lie to you. That boy took my breath away. I didn't even know, what was I supposed to say? And I honestly don't believe that he wanted an answer from me. I think he had some of his own kind of like fear, right? Like there was something inside of him that was stirring in that 2016 period. So he got up and he asked me the question. He immediately just sat down, speechless. He went on, and some other people asked me some other questions. A couple of days later, I'm sitting in my office in Brooklyn, and his voice came to me. Like I heard him talking to me. And I said to myself, I know exactly who those people were. They were good people. They were the silent majority. They were the people that looked out through their blinds, saw what was happening, and felt like they couldn't do anything. And guess what? They probably didn't have those deep relationships with their neighbors. And that's what probably happened. Because I will tell you this, if my neighbor, and I'm like this too, and I'm that annoying neighbor that knocks on your door, I know every neighbor. My block. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, I don't care if you're white, black, I know you, and you know me, and you got my number. Because that's what I do. I said to myself, imagine if you had a neighbor and your children played with those children, right? And when it was your holiday, they came to you and wished you a happy holiday. When it was their holiday, you wished them a happy holiday. When your car broke down, your neighbor came to assist you. When their car broke down, you helped them. You know, one day you happened to be late at work and their kid was outside and you said, don't you worry, you come to my house till your mom come home from work. That we had those kind of relationships. You better believe that, God forbid, a ICE agent came to your house or a law enforcement agent. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going outside. You know why? Because my relationship is deep enough for you that I'm willing to protect you now. Because now you're my friend, right? Now you're my real neighbor. You're not just neighbor because your house is next to my house. But it's because you and I have built a bond together. And so I say to people all the time, that's what they don't want in America, right? There's so much division and polarization that they don't want us to have those kind of relationships. Like people are thinking I'm crazy. I have neighbors now where I live, they're Republicans. And I get in conversations with them, and guess what? Believe it or not, I agree with them on more things than they sometimes they want to be like, no, I can't believe I agree with you on that. One last thing, because I was telling somebody else this earlier, just to give you the point about how we're so polarized, and I don't play into that. Don't call me liberal, don't call me progressive, don't call me I'm on the left. I'm a human being that cares about things that I hope that you care about too. I had this conversation one time with this Republican couple, and I said this to them, and guess what? They didn't even know. I said to them, I was talking to them about public education. We were just having a conversation. This is what I said to them. I said, did you know that in America, public schools are funded based on the tax brackets of the districts that they are in? So for example, if your public school is in a district where there are high earners that live in that community and they're paying taxes, right, on high earnings, a larger percentage goes back to that local public school district. In another district where poor people, immigrants, poor working class people, right, they are also paying taxes and the percentage of their taxes goes back to that school district. So they literally were like, wait a minute. Now mind you, you're two Republican couple. They said, that doesn't seem right. And I said, well, it's not about whether it's right, it's about what it is. That's what it is. They were outraged. They said, it's not fair. They literally, you should have saw them, it was amazing. They were like, that's not right. I said, guess what? You and I found an issue that we both agree on. I went to another subject. I said, listen, in America, we don't all have health care. Do you think people should die? or get really chronically sick because they just keep thinking about that medical bill that they're gonna get, that they won't even go to a doctor because they don't have health insurance. They said, that's not right. I said, do you believe people should have access to health care? Guess what they said? Absolutely. That's a universal issue here. Everybody gets sick. No, sickness doesn't care if you're Republican or Democrat. They don't care if you're left or right or conservative or white, black, Latino, Muslim. They don't. Sickness doesn't care. And so this same couple just agreed with me, by the way, on 2 issues. And I said, we're going to stop here because this is a lot. I don't want to. I might have to convert. We might have to do something. But it was so beautiful to have a respectful conversation with people that I thought I disagreed with totally on a lot of things. And only on 2 issues we've already come to some common ground. And so somebody benefits from our division. Somebody benefits from you being on one side and me being on one side. So I'm just saying to all of you today, don't play into that. There are people who are counting on us to do this right. And guess what? We are not enough. And we need more people. And we need to build and expand what we're doing. And I'll refer to you to a recent post that I posted on Facebook and on Instagram. I do a radio show in New York City every Wednesday morning. It's really early for you folks, but if you happen to be up about 4 o'clock in the morning, you are welcome to stream it, because you could stream it anywhere in the country, but in New York, you could hear it live on the radio on 99.5 FM. And I got an email from a guy last week, and I posted it. I took his name out because I didn't want to, I wanted to respect his confidentiality. And he wrote me an email and he said, "Hey Linda, my name is blank, and I'm an Orthodox Jew from Rockland County." And he said to me, "As you may know, your name sparks emotion." That's a nice way of saying that I'm very controversial in this community. Apparently my name sparks emotion in the community that he comes from. And he said, one day I was driving to work and I turned on the radio in my car and your voice came up. So I decided that I wanted to keep listening. And apparently he's been listening a few times. And he says that what I realize is that you have helped me become a lot more open-minded. And what I thought to myself is that I should listen more. And that I wish other people would listen more. Because if more people heard you, they would actually see that you are not the stereotype. And they get to experience you for themselves. I'm paraphrasing. So again, don't underestimate the power of your voice, the power of your passion, the power of your heart to transform the hearts of other people. And remembering that there are a lot of people in this world that are counting on you, and that there are little things that we could all do, and that we are not helpless. And that if each of us did just one little thing, imagine 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, we could do something to alleviate harm and suffering everywhere. So thank you to the MSA and CARE Washington for having me here today.